Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Good morning. Happy Monday. This is Marty Kaiser with another episode of the Real Estate TidBits podcast. I hope everyone has survived the hurricanes with a minimum of personal damage to either your property or any of your loved ones. Fortunately, in Orlando, I think we kind of dodged a bullet, relatively speaking. All the forecasts had the Orlando area getting 10 to 15 inches of rain, and they were talking about Category 2 type winds coming through. From what I could tell on both a personal level and kind of following this storm, we probably in most areas only got 6 or 7 inches, which is still a lot of rain, but not nearly as bad as 10 or 15 inches. And our wind capacity, I think, peaked at about 90 miles an hour on gusts. And they were talking about Category 2 winds on a more steady basis, which would have been far greater than that. And accordingly, if the forecast had held, we would have had a lot more damage in Orlando. So we were very fortunate. I think the main reason why we didn't have quite as bad an experience was when the storm hit landfall, it hit more around the Siesta Key area, so a little bit south of Tampa. And accordingly, when it cut across the state, it hit us from a little different angle and minimized the after effects of it. So we were very, very fortunate. My thoughts and prayers are out to all the people in the west coast of Florida. I can't imagine having 2 hurricanes hit you back to back, the damage it would cause. And you know, I'm sure most people that had the effects of the 2 hurricanes, they were still trying to clean up and ascertain their damages, dealing with insurance, and then they had a second storm. So I can't imagine that, and I feel so bad for those folks. My podcast has tried to indicate over the past few months, a lot of these different events that I chat about besides real estate values and how to best sell your home and all the different things that someone interested in real estate would look at is the interrelationship of a lot of events. And the storm has caused a few things in Orlando and the after effects to real estate. The main thing is the continued crisis we have with homeowners insurance. I'll give you 2 different illustrations of that. The first one is far more dire, but I've been trying to, I always try to keep up on things so I can share with you things that you need to be aware of. And the insurance crisis is even worse than you can imagine. For the folks on the southwest coast that had these 2 hurricanes, there's a fair amount of instances where the insurance companies are trying to say, oh, Storm 1 caused this, Storm 2 didn't, or Storm 2 caused this, Storm 1 didn't. In essence, they're trying to dodge making people whole. And people that had catastrophic damage may have lost all or a good value or a good part of their home's value. And unless a person is very well off financially, that's a cataclysmic event. And I had read stories that are sad that people are contemplating not only not building their home, rebuilding their homes, but just walking away because of the corruption we're having in Florida to do with the insurance industry. As you know, for most of us, we have a 2% hurricane deductible, but it also is confusing because water intrusion, they might consider flood damage. And if they consider flood damage and you don't have flood insurance, then your homeowner's insurance won't cover the damage from that. And only about 25% of residents in Florida that own homes have flood insurance. So that means 75% of the residents don't. And by the same token, the flood carrier may try to claim that your damage is from the hurricane, not from floods. So you've got these 2 entities that are trying, in a fair number of cases, dodging responsibility. It's bad enough when you're a homeowner, you're displaced from your home. It might be uninhabitable. You've suffered a huge financial loss. You've paid your homeowner's insurance. You've tried to secure your real estate, and yet you can't get just fair treatment from these insurance companies. And then the thing that's really exacerbated this is they've changed some of the insurance laws in Florida over the last couple years. So now when the insurance companies don't want to honor their claims to residents really, their only recourse then is to retain an attorney. And so if they retain an attorney, besides it being a long, drawn-out process, they have to pay the attorney to get the attorney started. So the state of Florida, I just scratch my head how badly represented we are by our government. This insurance crisis has built and built and built, and yet they don't make changes enough to protect the citizens and consumers who elect these officials. Kind of why I scratch my head, too, is we seem to keep electing the same people who are not doing an adequate job to protect Florida residents. Hurricanes and storms and affordable homeowners insurance are some of the biggest problems we have, and they certainly impact real estate. Not only do they affect real estate values, but they eliminate some people from buying real estate because they just don't want to deal with the increasing cost of homeowners insurance, the difficulty in securing it, or in these cases that I'm citing to you, having to worry about if you do have a large claim due to storms, the insurance company trying to abdicate responsibility. The insurance industry, to say the least, is a very disappointing industry and is strictly out there to make profits, not protect their policyholders. This is not the case with every insurance company, but unfortunately there's more than a few that have taken this approach. On a personal level, I'll give you my personal situation. I've lived in the same home since it was new, and hopefully we take very good care of it and have had no claims on the house. We've been very fortunate. I had farmers insurance, and farmers insurance, as you may know, has pulled out of Florida. They're systematically canceling homeowners policies. So I was one of those that was canceled. My policy will be canceled effective this November. So I've been shopping around for homeowners insurance, and let me tell you, it has not been an enjoyable process. But the reason that I bring this up on a personal level is I did secure new homeowners insurance, probably equal or slightly worse coverage than I had, and my premium went up $1,400. And that's also with increasing my deductible limit to try to keep it more affordable. So I went from a premium of just under $2,500 to a premium of just under $3,900. I consider that a pretty significant increase. And the thing that's most scary, now that we've had these two big storms so far, hopefully we won't have any more this year, I can only imagine what insurance premiums are going to be in 2025 for people that are looking for insurance. You'll probably have more companies that want to pull out, and then you're going to have more companies that cite these storms as justification for these large rate increases. The other thing that's frustrating in Florida is we don't seem to learn from our behavior. The areas with the biggest damages and claims are obviously properties on or near the water. And those communities, such as the southwest part of Florida, South Florida, they're getting the brunt of these big storms. These storms are happening more frequently, and these storms are incurring in much more dire results. And whether you want to say we have a climate crisis, everybody puts labels and it's a political hotbed, so I'm not going to label it. All I can do is look at the facts, and the facts are we're getting more storms, bigger storms, and they're more repetitive. And yet, a lot of people keep rebuilding in these areas. Understandably, they don't want to relinquish their homestead and be forced to move. But by the same token, if you keep building in areas that are having this type of damage, unless you're in a position to build a far superior home to withstand storms, at which would be a much higher price point, it seems kind of self-defeating to keep building in areas that are not surviving these storms. It's just food for thought. When you repeat behaviors that have an unsuccessful conclusion, it seems like a change in philosophy is needed. And this has been a pet peeve of mine for years, not only as a homeowner, but as a practicing real estate broker, because insurance is one of the biggest issues when we sell a home, of making sure that we can secure new insurance for our customer and that it's quote unquote relatively affordable. A lot of these insurance companies too, if they feel your roof's beyond a certain age, they won't insure the home. So now you're faced with putting a new roof on. It's just mind-boggling how the state of Florida operates. That's all I'll say about that. One thing on a positive note, as I've mentioned before, I do live in the Hunters Creek area, and I wanted to give a shout out to Hunters Creek, both their development and their HOA. Their development this was one of the, what they call a planned unit development. It had extensive planning go into it. It's been awarded national awards over the years for being one of the best places in the United States to live from a variety of barometers. But what they did in Hunters Creek was they created a situation where, when you think of how large Hunters Creek is, they have over 7,500 single-family homes and over 25,000 residents, including their apartments and condominiums. They've really survived these storms quite well. You have very few cases of flooding, and you have very few cases of power being lost for any length of time. This last storm, on a personal level, I had no loss of power. So when you read about other folks in Florida who are still not having power, and over 1 million people in Florida lost their power, I got to give a shout out to the Hunters Creek developers. Also, the Homeowners Association and their crew tried to make sure that all the storm drains and such were clear to allow the overrun of water to flow and not cause flooding. So I did want to give both groups my sincere thanks and a job well done. And it's one of the reasons why not only have I lived here for a long time, but I highly recommend Hunters Creek for a variety of reasons as a great destination for future homeowners. Another thing that was interesting from a real estate perspective, and this is the kind of barometer where you can't win for trying. As you probably know, in my last podcast, we talked about the Federal Reserve lowering the rate and how that would have a corresponding effect on lowering mortgage rates a little bit, which it did have. At the same time, we spoke about it's projected that the Fed's going to lower their rates 4 or 5 times in 2025. And my expectations for 2025, from an interest rate standpoint, would be that rates would probably decline to around 5%. So when we had this last rate increase a few weeks back, the mortgage rates did go down a little bit, which was expected. However, in the last week or 10 days, believe it or not, we had a jobs report that was far better than expected. Well, that's good news. When you have lower unemployment and employers are hiring more people, that's good for the economy. It's good for everything. You know, the less unemployment you have, the better a society you have. But because the job report went down, the powers that be to do with inflation and interest rates, etc., actually raised the rates again. So now the rate increase that we had a few weeks ago, it was offset by this jobs report, so the interest rates went up. That's a short-term thing, but it just shows you the volatility of how people react to news that have a big impact on everybody's life. The thing that wasn't really highlighted, which I find interesting, we're in such a negative society, especially with all the political misinformation that is thrown about, that it wasn't really highlighted in any of the media that having a positive job report is a great thing. People should be happy about that. And there's so much criticism given to the party in charge right now that they should also give some credit when the job report is good. Considering what unemployment was when COVID was at its peak and how low unemployment's gotten now, to me is a real encouraging thing, and it shows that a lot of the policies that were identified to stimulate job creation, to minimize real estate foreclosures and such, pretty much effectively worked. So I think, people, when they're evaluating, need to look at the entire context, because when you get political discourse, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, positive news is either not discussed or it's just kind of poo-pooed or misrepresented. And it's too bad that people can't be a little bit more truthful and when something positive happens, to acknowledge it. But that's the kind of society we're in right now. Last but not least, I voted today, and I've been doing the mail-away voting for a couple of years right now, and to me, it's great. I can do it in a non-rush manner. I don't have to worry about waiting in lines. I'm confident that my ballots are handled correctly. I carefully read all the instructions. So I highly recommend mail-ins or doing early voting, just because the day of the elections is always a lot more hectic, especially in a presidential election. So last but not least, I'll give a little 30-second update on sports. We're in the next round of the Major League Baseball playoffs, what they call the divisional series or the league divisional series. I always confuse the terminology. But we're down to 4 teams right now. In the American League, we have the New York Yankees playing against the Cleveland Guardians. First game starts tonight. The Yankees are led by Aaron Judge, who had one of the great seasons of all time. The Cleveland Guardians had a great year and overperformed expectations, so it should be a very interesting series. In the National League, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers, headed by Shohei Ohtani, who also had one of the greatest seasons in the history of baseball, was the first player to ever have 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a season. And they're playing against the New York Mets. The Mets were a team that had major struggles early in the year. They were really playing horribly. And then the latter third of this year, they went on a real hot streak, got into the playoffs, and have continued their hot streak. So their playoff series started last night, and the Dodgers beat them, and Game 2 is today. So that also should be a good series. I think a lot of casual fans are hoping for New York Yankees, Los Angeles Dodgers World Series to see the 2 greatest players in baseball, Judge and Ohtani. That's all for now. Everybody stay safe. Hopefully this new storm they're talking about is not going to evolve into much, but keep an eye on that. They're starting to have news about that. Be safe. Have a great upcoming Halloween, and then we've got Thanksgiving on the door front. Take care, be well. Marty Kaiser out.